This is Israel Take 3, and I'm David Began. This season has generously been sponsored by the Sclair Family Foundation. Stick with us. So after my adventures in the Northern Galilee, something was still bugging me. We talked about how over 80% of that region was evacuated when Hezbollah rockets started falling on October 8th. And yeah, it makes sense. And we met people like Ben Guido, who stayed behind to defend his village. And we talked about what it means to make that type of decision. But then I started thinking about another part of the north, one that nobody evacuated from. That's the Golan Heights. So go ahead and grab your map of Israel again. Now, see that big lake up north? That's the Kinneret, or the Sea of Galilee. Look a little bit to the east and to the north of that lake, and you'll see a huge elevated region. That's the Golan. It's a massive volcanic plateau, rugged, mostly rural, and very, very strategic. Because from up there you can see deep into Israel, and you can see across to Syria, Lebanon, and even parts of Jordan. In 1948, it was part of Syria, but then in 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israel captured it from Syria, and then almost lost it again in 1973, during the Yom Kippur War in one of the fiercest tank battles in history. Eventually, Israel annexed the Golan Heights in 1981, a move that was recognized by the United States in 2019. It's a place that sits on a knife's edge, bordering not one, not two, but three different enemy states. So here's what's bugging me. Why wasn't it evacuated? The Golan Heights, with all of its vulnerability, its proximity to Syria and Lebanon, why were the residents never told to leave? Why weren't evacuation orders issued like they were just a few kilometers to the west? So I figured I'd go straight to somebody who could answer that.
Seeing what's happening in the Gaza envelope, and remember the chaos on October 7, understanding that the Galilee is under threat and towns are starting to evacuate, the question comes to the table, and the decision is...
That's Yakov Selavan. He's a major in the IDF, and for the last 10 months, he's served as the deputy governor of the Golan Heights. By day, he's running the civilian and military coordination for the entire Golan region. By night, he was commanding a combat battalion on the Lebanese front. And somehow, in the middle of all that, he found time to sit down with us and offer some incredible insight.
For the past 10 months, I'm the deputy governor of the Golan Regional Council, a council, one of the largest ones geographically in Israel, from Mount Hermon up north, the tri-state border between Israel, Syria, and Lebanon, down to Hamat Gadel, which is where basically, I would say the Jordan River, basically where we have a tri-state border between Israel, Syria, and Lebanon. All in all, 300,000 acres, roughly, with 22,000 residents, which means we have a very small amount of residents per mile. I still serve in reserve duty, but as deputy governor, I'm basically exempt from compulsory service. I've been doing my best, including the upcoming weekend, to help my unit. My unit is called the 188 Armored Brigade. As I said, we were down south in the first few months of the war. And then we came up north. That's when I went to become deputy governor. We were in Lebanon during the operation crossing the border. I took part at night, I can say, in that operation, because the headquarters were here in the Golan Heights while the whole unit was in Lebanon and moving from town to town. Fascinating, I would say, Israeli phenomenon of being a deputy governor of a regional council in war at day, a combat operations officer in Lebanon at night. Sleep doesn't come in. No, that wasn't an option those days. And when my unit went on to Syria and then down back to Gaza now, I unfortunately couldn't take part. So I was in Syria for roughly an hour and a half with the unit 2 weeks ago, but that was sort of like a treat they gave me. It wasn't really being part of the actual operation. So that's me.
Okay, so let's just jump into this question of evacuation versus staying. My understanding is that the residents of the Golan Heights were really primarily not evacuated, as opposed to some of the places that I visited in the Northern Galilee, where they were either required to evacuate or chose to evacuate. So I'm assuming that you played a role in that decision-making process. What went into the decision to keep the residents there, and what was the process of making that decision, and how did you come to the conclusion that you came to?
I must say honestly that there were 2 points where this question came to discussion. The first is when I'm down south and our tanks are in Be'eri and Kfar Aza and Sderot, and I'm a reservist and I'm not in office. And the former governor and deputy in the night of October 7 have an emergency discussion, seeing what's happening in the Gaza envelope, and remember the chaos on October 7, understanding that the Galilee is under threat and towns are starting to evacuate, the question comes to the table, and the decision is to stay. And the decision is to stay because the understanding is that at that point, there's enough forces in the Golan and the Galilee that can make sure that an October 7 scene won't happen here. The second decision comes to our table, and I would say it's a bit different than the first. If on October 7, the decision is because there is a threat of a mass invasion from Syria, where we know there are Iranian proxies led by Hezbollah, we entered office officially in March, and that was exactly when Hezbollah created a new equation where every time Israel strikes past a certain line in Lebanon, in an area called the Baqa, they strike the Golan. That's the equation. So if we see on Twitter or Telegram or official media that something blew up in that area, we know in the next 24 hours we're going to be attacked. And the understanding was that there are rules to this sort of called game. And part of the equation says that Hezbollah doesn't shoot at civilians or doesn't try directly to shoot at civilians, but is trying to shoot at military bases. And there is what you call collateral damage, which is us, the residents of the Golan. I'm not defending Hezbollah, I'm giving facts. We saw it when you see where the missiles were shot. They weren't directly aimed at our towns. They were aimed at the military bases, but it's statistics. So, of course, when the missile flies, first of all, it affects several towns that get the sirens. And secondly, also houses and farms and residents are hit. And we see that certain towns are under very, very high threat from killer drones and from rockets. And in closed room, we start getting questions from the army and from the government is maybe you should consider evacuating several towns. Then we already had a perspective of 5 months of war. Unlike October 7, when the decision is made to evacuate dozens of towns in the north and in the south, no one knows what's happening yet. So I can't criticize that decision. But now we're 5 months into the war. Things are relatively stable down south. And even though the war is starting to escalate in the north, the direct threat of an invasion is not what it was before. Radwan, the special force of Hezbollah in the Lebanese border, is pushed back. So there are clashes at the border, but it's killer drones, it's missiles, it's not face-to-face. The invasion threat is not as strong as it was on October 6 and October 7. Same goes to Syria. We see that, again, there are abilities. Iran has their proxies, but we're much stronger than they were on October 7. So there are forces, there are a very large amount of military forces in the Golan.
At this point, I asked Yakov a question that might sound a little strange, even a bit naive. Why hasn't it been worse? Hezbollah has hundreds of thousands of rockets, some of them long-range, Iranian-made, GPS-guided. They could cause unimaginable destruction if they wanted to. So why haven't they? Why are so many of those rockets still sitting silent? Yakov had an interesting answer, which says a lot about the type of war that Hezbollah is or isn't fighting.
And we see another thing, which I think is the most critical element in our decision-making. If the rules of the game are that Hezbollah is trying to minimize Israeli civilian casualties, not because they love us, it's their decision-making, they don't want to escalate too much. I remind the listeners that Hezbollah, I'm not trying to defend them, but they did not want the war to start the way it started. They wanted to do October 7, much worse, much so-called better in their eyes, when it's a good time for them. And Sinwar and Hamas basically dragged Hezbollah into the arena without them wanting to be in it. And so they were trying to sort of keep a very gentle balance between showing solidarity to Gaza and striking Israel and not going into war. And we see with that rules of the game, with those rules of the games, we see that towns that are populated are not being shot at as much, rather than towns that were evacuated. And every morning, Hezbollah anti-tank missile operators wake up, they see a line of empty towns that all you have in them is military forces, meaning these are 100% military targets, and they choose which house they want to knock down. I recently spoke with an ambassador that told me that she was down just a few weeks ago, down in Be'eri and in Kfar Aza, and now she was in Matula. And she says Matula looks worse than Be'eri and Kfar Aza. And Matula is not the only one. Margaliyot, and I can start Manara. I can start naming different towns that became ghost towns, where every day Hezbollah was able to knock down houses, and the residents now can't go back home. Their home is destroyed. So every day in those, again, I'm talking now in March 24, every day Nasrallah woke up in the morning and he can look in the mirror and say to himself, I'm winning the war with a very low price. 85,000 Jews, Israelis are evacuated from their homes. I'm destroying their homes. And I'm not even going to war. I didn't lose 1 inch of ground. I'm losing a few commanders. It's not fun. But, right, I have a security zone in Israel. It used to be that Israel sets a security zone in my land. Now, I'm with that one soldier, there's a security zone there.
When we talk about evacuations, the conversation almost always stops at one word: safety. Is it dangerous? Are lives at risk? That's the whole question, right? But it turns out that's just the surface. There's a much more complicated calculus that goes into making the decisions to stay or go. When Yakov started walking me through the decision-making process, I realized there's an entire layer underneath. Questions no one talks about, like what happens to a town once it's emptied, or how many families will never return, and what happens to a child when his home becomes a suitcase.
And let me add in and say that one more thing we had already a perspective was that every survey done amongst the evacuees from the Galilee showed that 40% won't come back home, meaning communities are falling apart. Divorce, drug use, violence rate is going up. And we understood that staying and standing our ground, even though we're going to pay a price for it, is not only the right strategic thing to do, but also the right moral thing to do. Zionism always stood its ground. Our best answer to our enemies was to hold on and to even grow and strengthen ourselves. And we felt a moral obligation to bring another voice to the public arena and say, we are not evacuating and we're standing our ground.
This season, we've been talking a lot about decisions, the hard kind, the ones that come with consequences, with second guessing. In war, there are no perfect choices, only trade-offs. And the question always lingers, did we do the right thing? So I asked Yakov, looking back, was there any regret about the decision not to evacuate the Golan Heights? He didn't give me a yes or no answer. Rather, he told me this story.
But there's one moment, and that's the night of July 9. There's a couple from Kibbutz Ortal, one of our communities. They go for shopping. They leave their 13-year-old special ed child at home. And 5 minutes away from their home, a direct rocket hit kills them. It hits their car while they're driving. It's 1 to a billion, but it happens. And we understand that for the first time in 50 years, there are civilian casualties in the Golan. And right away, all the leadership, we all drove to that town to be with the community in their hardest moment. The road was blocked, but because of my job, I got permission to drive through. And I remember driving by the bodies of Noah and Neil. That's the name of the beautiful couple. And after seeing the bodies, as they were preparing them to put them on an ambulance and evacuate them, and then being with the community, I remember a moment, it was 2 or 3 a.m. I'm sitting back in my office with the governor. We're trying to come sort of debrief what just happened there. And there's one moment when we're looking into each other's eyes, and we both have a little bit of like I have now, a little bit of tears. And we didn't ask the question. We didn't ask each other. But we asked each other with our eyes. Are we doing the right thing? Because till now, it was so romantic. We were the perfect players in this war movie. And now we stood in front of 2 bodies and we have 3 orphans. Are we doing the right thing? And again, this is all without words, but the conclusion is yes. It's very painful. It's hard to grasp it. But we understand that if we evacuate, many more people will die. We, from day one, spoke this. We said it in every interview, in every meeting with people. We kept on repeating this mantra. We stay here. It's the right moral thing. It's the right strategic thing. We won't give the enemy a sense of victory. And suddenly we started seeing the community speaking in these terms. You hear a farmer, and he didn't get any paper with the agenda from us, and he's interviewed in a random TV station. They got to him directly, and they're trying to bring out all of the hard stuff from him, right? Because things are challenging. And then they ask him, so what do you think? Should you leave or what? What do you think you're going to do? And he's speaking our words. He's saying, no, it's my home. I must stay here. We see what's happening in the Galilee. It's the right moral thing. It's the right strategic thing. And suddenly we saw the whole community uniting around this idea. And in the harder moments, which we can discuss shortly, we saw this was what held the community here together. And every survey we did show that more than 90% of the people, leaderships, and residents support our decision to stand our ground.
And of course, I couldn't end the conversation without asking the question, the one that we've been asking all season. What does courage look like? Coming from an IDF commander and the deputy governor of a region under attack, a leader who's living the reality of this war day and night, I was curious how he would define it.
What's the definition of values? Value is something you're willing to pay a price for. If I really want your glasses, I'm willing to pay $200 for it, right? I'm going to pay that price. So if you believe in certain values, you need to be prepared to pay a price for them. Does that mean I'm running towards danger with my bare chest open, waiting? No, I'm going to do everything I can to protect my residents, to bring more bomb shelters, to bring more mental health care, to demand from the army to provide Iron Dome coverage, for example, is something the army dramatically improved following this incident. But I must stay here. And we're very focused now on building back better. If a year from now we speak, and the situation in the Golan, in any perspective, security, agriculture, tourism, economy, education, is the same as it was on October 6, 23, then we failed. Our job is to make sure that the Israeli government and NGOs and others join us to make sure that when we speak a year from now, the situation for every child in the Golan, for every adult in the Golan, is better than it was on October 6, 23. And that's not just because we deserve it, it's because we're not Israel's periphery. We're Israel's frontier. Yes, geographically, we're in the middle of nowhere, northeastern Israel. But we in the Golan view ourselves as the frontier. And we proved in the last 15 months that our existence here secures the rest of the country. If we weren't here, you'd have radical jihadists from Al-Qaeda or from Hezbollah threatening Tiberias and the Sea of Galilee and Safed, and you know what? Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. So in order to make sure that we can stay here and maintain our presence, we need to build back better, we need to grow, and that's going to come through building a strong community with a good educational system, with good medical care, with good mental health, and with a great and flourishing economy. It's part of protecting the Zionist idea, and it's part of protecting Israel's security.